The Handkerchief by Great 78. Chapter 116. Flashbacks and Future Plans.
What are you talking about?
Draco was entirely confused. Hermione knew the name Joel Willingham not from school, but from him. It was a shameful secret, the part he had played in the young wizard's death. There was no way that he had told her about standing watch whilst Caro had tortured the Willingham parents, and not had killed the boy. Hermione spoke, interrupting his thoughts of shame and guilt. "Well, first of all, about the other three. You were not the one to utter the curse against Dumbledore. That was Snape. And you helped Ted. Many times over. No one blames you for his death. And Dobby, well, that was just a horrible circumstance, and it's entirely upon Bellatrix. But Joel Willingham did not die." Hermione ran her hand up and down his arm comfortingly. Now he was the one who was confused.
"Hermione, I saw his dead body."
"Did you?" she asked, in a curious tone.
"Yes, right as we were about to leave."
"You saw his arm, lying on the ground, through the living room door, right before the four of you met on the front porch to leave," she said.
Yes. How did you know that?"
He looked at her in disbelief. "Draco, those memories. Well, you're not going to have to go back to him. Spend time with the Dark Lord, are you?"
"It's not in my future plans, no," he said. "Hopefully we never cross paths again."
Well, I suppose it's all right to tell you. You know how we visited all those muggle-born families? We helped them leave."
"Yes."
"Do you remember visiting Joel Willingham's house, to warn him or his family?" Draco furrowed his brow.
"No, I just assumed we ran out of time, or we missed that one, or we forgot."
"No, Draco, we didn't forget. Joel Willingham moved away a year or so before last summer."
"What are you talking about, Mai? I saw him, dead on the floor."
"The thing is, you didn't. Do you remember working with Snape at all last summer? Or spending time with him?" Hermione asked carefully.
I talked to him about Dumbledore. I went to his house. We talked then about Dumbledore."
Draco answered in confusion. There was something more, but... And at that time, you also talked about legitimacy. About altering memories. Do you remember?"
"No, you did, you..."
Now Draco was thoroughly confused. Hermione had talked to Professor Snape about her parents' memory alterations, and Draco had been the one to recommend that she talk to Snape. But why had he done that? What had made him think that Snape could be helpful with that? "You and Professor Snape created 4 false memories, 1 for each person on your team. The 2 of you worked together to create ones for Pettigrew, Nott, and Caro, and then you created 1 last one for yourself. Nothing as elaborate as theirs, just you standing watch on the front porch, and a glimpse inside the house right before you left. With your permission, Snape wiped any memories you had of the real Willingham house, the real way that things went down that day, and any discussions you had with him about altering memories."
"So, I did not kill Joel Willingham?"
Draco huffed out in a ragged whisper. "No, no one did. He and his parents and little sister moved away when he was 12.
"Oh my God, Mai! I just can't believe it."
"Let me show you," she said. And he looked into her eyes, muttering the spell, Legilimens. The same porch, The same front door. Draco watched from a short distance away, not wanting to be seen, as he would be coming back later with the Death Eaters. Hermione knocked twice, but there was no answer. From next door, a young boy no older than 12 stepped out onto his front porch. "You looking for the Hadleys, love?" he called out to her.
No, actually. The Willinghams?" she asked.
"Oh, yeah. Joel and Allison and their mum and dad. They moved to Croatia a couple of years ago now. Joel was a good mate of mine. Hated to see him go. He was cool. A fun bloke. The Hadleys live there now. It's just a young couple. They're always off on holiday. I think they're in Crete this week. Check back Sunday night for them."
Draco blinked. "Did that really happen that way?" "Yes. You were worried that if your team reported that everyone had escaped, it would seem odd, so you concocted this false memory. And you worried that you-know-who would search it specifically, so you wanted it to match theirs."
"Oh, wow. Just wow," he said in shock.
"And as far as today goes, you did not kill Dobby, either. That was all Bellatrix." He lay back in contemplation on the blanket, drawing her closer to him.
"I know in my mind that I didn't aim the knife at them. I just wish it hadn't happened."
"I know you do."
"And in any case, she saw what I did. She watched the knife veer off course. I used my occlumency, but before I could get it fully built up, she saw you."
"Me?"
"Yes, you at the Yule Ball, in your periwinkle dress with the flowers in your hair. In the memory you were holding out your arms to me to dance, and you smiled at me. You were so beautiful, you looked like a dream. And I think she knew then. Maybe not everything, but enough to know that I care about you, at least a little bit."
"Oh."
She rubbed patterns upon his torso. After a moment he recognized them. Northies, for endurance and survival. Algies, for protection from evil. Gibo and Wanjo, for partners, love, and comfort. "You know you don't need to write them on me," he teased.
"Hush, yes I do,"
she murmured into his chest. A few more moments passed in silence, then she asked,
"What are your plans now?"
I don't know. I can't go back to school. The Carrows will have heard about everything. I imagine the Malfoy name is not highly regarded amongst Death Eaters right now." He sighed. Not sitting for his examinations meant that he would not earn his NEWTs. His dreams of becoming an auror or a potions master would stay simply that. Only dreams. I suppose I will go back to Andromeda's house. Do you think the Order has any openings?" She giggled and rolled on top of him, kissing him lightly on the neck. He lay there, looking up through her tumultuous hair, at the stars twinkling above. In spite of the horror of the day, the death and the pain they had both witnessed, somehow they had both made it through unscathed. Neither of them had wands any more. Well, not ones that had chosen them, in any case. And both of them might have scars, but they had come through on the other side together. He kissed her deeply then, holding her tightly to him. He wanted to stay wrapped in her arms forever, but tonight he would settle for a couple of hours, he thought, as he set an alarm using his mother's wand. It could not be forever. Not today, anyway. They still had to get through this war, still had to find these Horcruxes and destroy them, still had to see this wizard and his followers defeated. Today had been a setback, a blow to them all, but some good had come of it. Luna and Ollivander were free, and nearly everyone had lived. And he would never have to share a meal or a house with Bellatrix Lestrange ever again. They awoke 2 hours later, the cushioning charm worn off, and the tide starting to come in. Draco and Hermione changed their blankets back to handkerchiefs, and brushed off the damp sand. Then he kissed his witch goodbye, and watched as she walked back towards where he assumed the house must be, hidden by magical enchantments. She disappeared, and he disapparated quickly before it was light enough for anyone to see him standing there on the beach. Back inside his room at the Tonks house, he borrowed some trousers and a shirt from Lupin. He showered and ate a delicious fry-up made by Raffi, who discussed brewing techniques with him whilst he ate. Lupin came into the kitchen for a slice of buttered toast and tea, sitting at the table with Draco, listening in on their conversation. After a moment he spoke up. "Draco, I must say I was highly impressed with your potioneering skills last night. I myself was never the best at brewing. I am rather horrible at following such precise instructions at times. Not to mention, so many potions have ingredients that must be gathered at the full moon, and I am usually rather preoccupied at that time." Both wizards chuckled a bit. Draco replied, "I appreciate that, Professor Lupin, but—" "Draco, I have not been your professor for nearly 4 years. Let us dispense with the formalities. Remus is fine." "Remus, then. But I'm not going to be able to go back to Hogwarts when the term resumes next week. And to get into higher education for potioneering or anything else, it's pretty much required that you complete your NEWTs. I was supposed to take them this June, but that's not going to be possible now." Draco sighed heavily. "It's a shame. I enjoy potions. I think I have a knack for them, but there's not much to be done for it." Remus considered for a moment. "Minerva thinks that this year will not count, if that's any consolation." "What do you mean?" he asked. "Just that instruction has been so disrupted this year, with the Muggle studies requirements and how defense is being taught. Plus, so many students have had to miss classes. She feels that this year will not count against students who wish to retake the courses another year. Hopefully, when all of this is resolved, Hogwarts can resume its normal instruction program, and you can take your NEWTs again." "It's an idea. I hadn't thought about that. That might explain why so few teachers are giving homework and additional projects." "It's entirely likely," Remus agreed. "Do you think you would come back to teach? After all, you were one of our best defense against the dark arts teachers," Draco offered. Remus laughed then. "I am not entirely sure that 13-year-old Draco Malfoy would have agreed with you," he said, wiping his eyes. "Perhaps not. 13-year-old Draco Malfoy was a bit of a shit." Draco laughed. "But he could surprise you." "I bet he could. I have heard a little bit about you, from Hermione, and from Kingsley. And of course your aunt and cousin think you're aces." Remus levitated his dishes into the sink to be washed by the charmed sponge, and stood to go. "And I must say," he continued, "it would be nice to have a master potioneer in the family. With my condition, and us not knowing what the baby will inherit, it would be helpful. Slughorn has been able to brew for me these past many months, but I know he plans to retire soon." I can do that. I'll learn how," Draco assured him. "You will not have to worry about that." Remus smiled at him and left the kitchen, leaving Draco to shake his head at the thought. Months ago, Lord Voldemort had ridiculed Draco by asking if he would babysit the cubs once his cousin married a werewolf. Now it did not seem like such an unlikely thing. Narcissa and Pym arrived that afternoon with Draco's rucksack, magically packed for him. Pym had ensured that his potions kit was replenished and well-stocked, and had collected the birds back into their cage for the short trip to his aunt's house. The two of them had also packed all of his clothes, his gifts from Hermione, his friends and his mother over the years, his books, both Muggle and magical, and Carlton. Once he and Pym got the birds resettled, the elf popped away to spend the evening with Raffi, whilst Draco joined the others in the living room.
"The mood has been rather grim at the manor," Narcissa was saying. "He was in a towering rage. I haven't seen Bellatrix since last night. Lucius is not very well. Seizures."
"No more than he deserves," Draco said viciously, as he entered and chose an empty chair. He was prepared to hand over Hermione and the others, if it meant that all would be forgiven by you-know-who. I had almost begun to believe he'd changed.
Narcissa twisted the cloth napkin in her lap, then smoothed it carefully, remembering her comportment lessons even now, when discussing the schism between her husband and her son. "There is a part of Lucius that wishes to do right by the son he loves, the son he is proud to call his own. And there's a part of him that cannot fathom failure and a painful death. To turn against the Dark Lord now would be to admit failure publicly, and to risk his own torture and death, not to mention ours."
Narcissa fixed Draco with a steady look.
"If you recall, it wasn't so long ago that you faced a similar choice. There was never really a choice for you. It was the same for him. As much as he does not wish to hurt you, he also does not want to lose you. I think he thought, once Potter and the others were brought to us, there was no possible escape for them, so he decided to create an escape for us."
Draco sat, breathing in and out to calm his emotions. "I am sorry, Mother, but these are just excuses. And, to be frank, they're shit. You are right. I did face a similar choice between hurting someone else and hurting the people I loved. And in the end, I couldn't do it. But Lucius was prepared to. Lucius is, and always has been, a self-centered asshole, and I'm done with him."
Across the room, Andromeda looked as though she had spelled herself with a cheering charm and was just barely holding herself together.
"But enough about that absolute ass, Mom. What are your plans? Will you stay here with us?"
Draco leaned forward to his mother. "Draco, I can't," Narcissa said. She held up a hand at his incensed expression. "Hear me out." She stood up to collect her thoughts, pacing in front of the fireplace as Draco, Andromeda, Tonks, and Lupin looked on. And then she began to speak.
Chapter 117. Narcissa's Story. "Mum, what are your plans? Will you stay here with us?" Draco asked hopefully.
"Draco, I can't,"
Narcissa said. She held up her hand to placate him.
"Hear me out."
Narcissa seemed to be gathering her thoughts, pacing the hearth rug. She looked up at the group gathered there, her son, her sister, her niece, and Remus, her nephew-in-law.
"When you left, yes, Bellatrix knew there was possibly more to it, more to your feelings than just disgust. But she is uncertain about what she saw. She's torn, trying to decide if what she saw was simply lust mixed with covetousness, or if you have actual feelings for Hermione. Secondly, she's also afraid of setting off the Dark Lord's temper, just as the rest of us have been all along. Apparently, when she called him, he was getting close, gathering answers, finding details about what it is that he's searching for. She interrupted him, and because it was she that summoned him, it has been she that has incurred the most wrath."
"So she didn't tell him what she saw, or suspected, about me and Hermione?" breathed Draco. It was a huge relief. Hermione already had a target on her back. If Voldemort thought that one of his Death Eaters was in love with a Muggleborn, the Muggleborn would be hunted just to punish his own follower.
"No," Narcissa answered. "But I did tell him something to attempt to put him off your trail."
At Draco's look of confusion, she went on.
"I insisted that you in particular hated Potter and the others with a passion. I brought up how Miss Granger always got higher grades, how Potter always wanted Quidditch, how Weasley had so many close siblings and friends."
"Thanks, Mom." Draco huffed sarcastically. She fixed him with a clever smile.
"In short, I made it seem as though you have a vendetta against them, personally, and that you left to hunt them down and bring them back to him."
Draco stopped breathing. "So he doesn't know," he whispered. "He doesn't realize I've essentially defected."
"No, he does not know,"
Narcissa said. He did not know what to think. This entire time he'd been worried that Voldemort was going to be hunting him down next for punishment, but it turned out that the Dark Wizard thought that he alone was one of his most loyal among the Death Eaters. "This puts you in a unique position, Draco. In theory, you may still be able to act as a double agent," Remus chimed in. He was right, of course, but not about everything, Draco thought. He could act as a double agent, but he would not be unique. Professor Snape was still doing the same, though the Order did not know it.
"So, come stay with us, sissy," said Andromeda pleadingly. "What do you mean?" asked Narcissa. "Say to him that you're planning to join Draco in his search for the three of them. Say they're besmirching your son's reputation, they're befouling the name of pureblood, whatever it takes. And move here. You could be safe here with us."
Andromeda looked hopefully at her sister.
"I can't,"
Narcissa said gently. "If this is about Lucius," Tonks began, but Narcissa shook her head.
"It's not about Lucius. It's about Harry Potter."
At this pronouncement, everyone in the room grew silent. After a moment, Draco spoke. "I'm not sure what you mean, Mom."
"You know about my talent,"
Narcissa began, resuming her pacing.
"Your legitimacy, you mean?"
Andromeda asked, whilst Draco nodded. Remus and Tonks looked slightly confused, but kept their attention on Narcissa.
"Yes, but you recall as a child I would talk about how some people had colour?"
Narcissa asked her sister. Andromeda's brow furrowed.
"Yes, the little Bowles boy with... You said he was covered in red, and he was diagnosed with dragonpox 2 days later."
Tonks spoke up. "My mom once told me about a friend of your mother's when you were young. You told Mom she was swirling in dark blue, and wasn't she lost at sea not long after?"
Andromeda shivered. "Yes, the elder Madame Marsh. She didn't know how to operate, the poor woman."
Draco remembered Ted telling him that Andromeda did not know how to operate well. From the far-away look in his aunt's eyes, he knew she was imagining herself in that witch's place. Narcissa, too, saw the look of Andromeda's face and hurriedly continued.
"But it isn't always about someone dying. I see it around happy people, good things as well. The yellow couple, remember?"
Andromeda laughed.
"Oh, yes, that was beautiful."
"What's that, then?" Tonks asked with a smile.
"We were in Muggle London, shopping for dresses, for a New Year's gala, over the Christmas holidays. It was just after you were betrothed to Lucius, was it not?"
Andromeda asked. A shadow passed over Narcissa's face.
"Yes, that's right."
Andromeda hurried on.
"Right, well, you would have been nearly 15, so I would have been close to 17. It was one of our first times alone in the Muggle world, if I recall."
Now Narcissa smiled.
"It was a beautiful day. Cold, but the sun was shining. We bought those little bags of warm candied almonds from a man selling them on the street. Do you remember, Andre?"
It was Andromeda's turn to smile fondly.
"There was a Christmas market, a tiny one, on a little side street.
We walked through the booths to look at all the adorable things, and we came upon a hut selling hot chocolate. There was this beautiful young muggle woman there. She couldn't have been older than 25, so. I remember she was wearing the prettiest plum-coloured coat with a furry red stole. I remember thinking, I want a coat just like that. She laughed.
And the man she was with, he was so handsome,
Narcissa continued, staring at the firelight in front of her, as if still watching this scene unfold in her mind.
Lovely dark eyes, so tall, with a short beard.
And you said, Andromeda said in a curious tone, as though trying to remember the exact words,
he was bathed in yellow light, bright yellow like the sun. I wanted to stay and look at them, so I asked you if we could buy hot chocolate.
We did, and as we stood there drinking them, the man got down on one knee and asked the woman to marry him. Andromeda wiped a tear from her eye at the memory.
And when she said yes, the yellow light spread, and suddenly she was yellow too. It was the most beautiful thing I think I've ever seen up until then.
Narcissa finished, still watching the memory play in her mind. She turned to look at her sister.
Do you remember what happened later that same day?
Now Andromeda blushed, casting down her eyes in embarrassment and smiling. Yes, she said in a small voice. Mum, what did you do? Tonks asked with a smile. I had orchestrated a meet-up with your father, but I hadn't told Sissy beforehand. He was out shopping as well, and we ran into each other in Harrods. Ted acted very surprised to see us, of course, and offered to take us to dinner at a little pub he knew nearby.
The Rose and Crown!
Narcissa laughed, her eyes alight. The Rose and Crown, agreed Andromeda, laughing along with her.
I take it the Rose and Crown was not the typical establishment frequented by the Black Sisters?
Remus asked, with a knowing smile.
It certainly was not, Narcissa said. Smoky and crowded, not enough room to swing a kneazle, and the whole thing was no larger than a broom cupboard. She laughed. But the cottage pie was divine.
I recall you having very little objection to the ale, either, giggled Andromeda, earning her a sharp look from Narcissa, who immediately dissolved into giggles herself. When she had recovered, however, she continued,
But there was something I never told you about that night.
Andromeda sobered. What was it, Sissy?
When the three of us met in Harrods, I knew immediately that it was no accident.
How? We were so careful.
Because both of you were a faint pink colour. But as soon as you saw each other, the pinks became so vibrant, so bright and rich. I knew then,
Narcissa said, nodding with a smile at the memory.
I knew that after graduation you were not going to marry Rabistan or any of the other purebloods that Father was trying to get you into a marriage contract with.
Andromeda gasped. After a beat, she said, You never told me.
I did not want to lose you, Narcissa said, forehead creasing in remembered sadness. I thought if I told you that I knew, you would cut me out of your life.
And then I did, whispered Andromeda, almost to herself. When Mother and Father disowned me, I cut ties to you, thinking that you would treat me just like they did.
I never wanted that, Andrei, Narcissa said. But I was still living with Mother and Father when you married, and by the time you had Nymphadora, I was married to Lucius. I moved from our family home directly to the manor, and Lucius would never have allowed...
At this, Narcissa broke down, crying. I know, Sissy, Andromeda said, rushing to her sister's side to comfort her. Draco looked up at his cousin, who met his eyes, her hair turning the same white blonde as his, as she smiled at him. He both scoffed and laughed at the same time. Merlin, what a Hufflepuff! The two sisters parted and walked back to the sofa together, Tonks moving over to make room for her aunt. "Mum, this is all very interesting, but what does this have to do with Potter?" he asked.
"These colours, they're not just colours. It's like a signature, a message, an imprint, if you will. In the case of the yellow couple, or Andre and Ted, they had made the imprints on each other. In the case of the others, the ill boy and the witch lost at sea, his was the sickness, not yet manifest. Hers, well, the only thing I can liken it to is she was marked by death, and she was going one way or another."
Draco struggled not to shudder at this idea. Instead he asked, "So what did you see that has you convinced that you need to stay there and not come here?"
"It was love."
Narcissa's voice was barely audible above the crackle of the fireplace. He leaned towards her. "Sorry, what?"
"Love. His mother's love, to be precise."
Narcissa exhaled a long breath and picked up her napkin again, all etiquette lessons forgotten as she twisted it vigorously. She stared down at it, seeing something else entirely in her mind's eye.
"Lily Potter died, but she left her imprint, her signature. No, it's more than that. It was her protection on the boy. It was similar to the imprint that many mothers make upon their children at birth, but in this case it was so much more. It's an old kind of magic, very elemental, very primitive. The element of sacrifice, it intensifies the usual mother's magic into something altogether more powerful. I am assuming it's what's protected him all these years. It surrounded him, enveloped him, if this makes sense. I noticed it the first time I saw him, years ago, at the Quidditch World Cup. It was a strong, golden light. It was still there when I saw him in Diagon Alley. But when he was at the manor, something was different. It had faded, grown less intense, perhaps. Where before it seemed to permeate his very essence, his magical core, this time the light seemed to be almost external. It was with him, but no longer within him. It was weaker, as though it could no longer protect him the way it once had. It was as though I was seeing it through a veil, and it called to me."
Draco struggled to school his face. "Sorry again. What?" Narcissa looked up at him. She reddened a bit in embarrassment, but her eyes held his steadily.
"It called me to act."
"What called you?" he asked. "And how? To do what?" This was all highly confusing.
I think it was her spirit, the echo of that imprint. She wasn't there, she wasn't a ghost. No one else could see her, but something was there, and it was asking for my help."
"Asking for your help?" Andromeda asked, tilting her head in curiosity.
"Yes, asking me," Narcissa said vehemently. I think it was partly my ability with legitimacy, but it might have been because I was the only other mother in the room. I'm not even certain that the spirit realized that I could sense it. It was just a general, overarching ache, a call out to any like-minded being for help. It was as though she knew that he was in danger."
Narcissa stood and resumed her pacing.
"And he was in danger the entire time. He seemed to be struggling. His thoughts were all over the place. Sometimes he was there in the room with us, and sometimes it was as though he was far away in a different place, almost like he was a different person. You know how it was. When I was younger, Andrei, when the thoughts began to get too loud, it was like that, all over again. How overwhelming the thoughts were, but it was almost as though it was doubled, like he had 2 people inside of him. It was so hard to block out, and I knew it was best that I didn't."
Everyone was quiet for a time, each trying to figure out what it all meant. Draco broke the silence. "So, you will not come?"
She answered gently, "I can't. I made a promise. I told that spirit, that light, that I would protect him."
"And you can't protect him from here?" he asked roughly. It was frustrating, knowing that first his witch and now his mother were putting their own personal safety, putting everything on the line to help Harry fucking Potter.
"I think," Narcissa said carefully, "that being closer to the danger will allow me to spot it more easily when the time comes."
"But are you sure that—" Draco began, but his mother interrupted him.
"I am sure, Draco."
Her word was final. After another moment's pause, he nodded. His aunt could sense the need for a change in subject, so she got to her feet. "Well, I'm going to see if Raffi needs help with dinner. You'll stay and eat with us, Sissy?"
"Of course,"
Narcissa agreed. Tonks yawned. "I think I might need a bit of rest before dinner," she said, rubbing her belly, which looked to have grown larger just in the day or so that Draco had been here. Her time was drawing very close, he assumed. Remus helped her up, saying, "Andromeda, I will help with dinner. Just give me a moment to help Tonks." And, suddenly, Draco found himself alone with Narcissa. "I had no idea that you could see those things," Draco murmured.
"Yes, it can be quite helpful sometimes." She raised her eyebrow with a tiny smile. "I could tell, for instance, back when you were 7 and you came in asking for a new broom because the old one had been lost, that there was much more to the sordid story."
Draco laughed. "Quite. Theo and I were racing, and I lost control and flew into those rhododendron bushes in the garden. My broom broke into about 6 pieces.
"Yes, I remember Bogan thinking that perhaps a freak storm had passed through."
Narcissa laughed. Draco shook his head, still smiling, thinking of the elderly, half-blind garden elf that had passed away a few years later.
"It's also how I could tell. Well, it's how I knew that Miss Granger was quite special to you. Perhaps before even you knew it."
Narcissa fixed him with a knowing stare. "What do you mean?" he asked in confusion.
"The summer, after your early years at Hogwarts, whenever you talked about your friends and the people at school, when you would mention her, there was a hazy light about you. It was very faint at first, sometimes green, but usually faintly pink, almost white. It got stronger every year until—"
Here, Narcissa smiled and dropped her eyes. "Until what?" Draco asked guardedly. He was almost afraid to know what had changed and when. He had no idea his mother was so intuitive.
"Well, you see, the first time I saw Miss Granger, Hermione, it was at the Quidditch World Cup, do you recall?"
"How can I forget?" Draco said, heaving a sigh at the memory of that night in the woods.
"Yes, but up in the minister's box, when we were all seated together. That was the first time I saw the 2 of you together, and I could see that her colour was the same as yours."
"What?"
"Yes, the faint pink, the occasional green. It was the same, but it was still very nearly imperceptible. When you returned home after your 4th year, I saw you both exit the train separately. The light that you shared still matched. It was still quite faint, but It had definitely changed colours. I wasn't sure what to make of it at first. Of course, there were lots of students in colours that day. Greys, blacks, ambers. The Diggory boy had just died, after all.
Right, he murmured.
It stayed faint nearly the entire summer, but then, sometime in August, it started getting bright again. I did not know what had changed, but I could tell something had.
She finally wrote back to me, Draco said, lost in memories. That entire summer, I wrote to her, but she didn't write back until the middle of August. It wasn't much, but it told me that she still at least would listen to me, that she cared enough about me to write back.
And then, when you got off the train for Christmas during your 5th year, that's when I knew for certain.
What do you mean? Draco held his breath, blushing a bit, remembering what had happened on the train ride home in the trolley witch's alcove.
The colour, it was incredibly strong, vibrant, from both of you. I knew that whatever else had happened that year, things were different for the two of you. It's still quite strong. Each time I look at you, it's there. But when she's with you, when the three of us visited here before, and even at the manor the other night, the colour intensifies all over again.
Draco was lost in thought at the very idea of it all. Then his mind remembered something that she had just said. You said the colour changed. You said at the World Cup it was green and pink and white, but you said it changed after our 4th year. What colour was it?
It was a bluish purple, kind of a periwinkle colour,
Narcissa said, lost in thought. Then she looked carefully at him.
Your colour just got vibrant again. I take it perhaps that means something to you.
He could feel his blush creeping up on him, but he could do nothing to hide it. Perhaps, he said. His mother hummed. Well, dinner, he said, in an effort to move past the subject lest she question him further. He extended an arm to her to accompany her to the dining room off the kitchen.
Dinner,
she agreed, her lips twisting in a small smile as she took his arm. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Handkerchief by Great 78.